G'day everyone. Look, apologies if I'm looking a bit bleary-eyed. It's very early here this morning and I'm actually reshooting this video thanks to a tweet posted late yesterday, or I think midday yesterday, from Tesla Tom, our good friend Tesla Tom. If you don't follow Tesla Tom, I'll put a couple of, and his channel Ludicrous Feed, I'll put a couple of links in here. But he put this tweet up yesterday, and it made me think there's actually another angle to this video that I'd already shot. So here we are doing a reshoot. Let's get underway. Look, my initial video was about the fact that there'd been an announcement during the week that Australia wasn't going to have an EV policy until mid-2020. And it got me thinking about sort of contrasting that to Norway, who'd made some announcements that, they're going to phase out combustion engine vehicles, I think, for passenger transportation by 2025, and those differences that creates. So if you think about EV sales in Australia, I think there's only maybe between 7,000 or 8,000 out of sort of millions of cars in Australia are EVs, or pure battery electric vehicles. Compared to Norway, where last year a third of all vehicles sold were full battery electric vehicles, and that rises to 50% if you include plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. And the reason that they do that is that in Norway there's also very generous incentives offered by both, I think, at the sort of country level by that government, but also in sort of by the regions. And we don't have that in Australia. It might make you think, why do Norway do that? Why do they offer really generous incentives? Why have they made this announcement about phasing out? And I think one of the reasons is that, depending on where you get your stats from, between 98 and 99% of their electricity is generated from renewable sources. So it's a really easy way to sort of green their whole fleet and reduce their reliance on fossil fuels, or reduce their demand on fossil fuels. And there's absolutely no reason at all Australia couldn't be the same as that. Solar, wind, batteries, and then having that transition to the electrification of the particularly passenger transportation makes sense, and Australia could actually be a really like a world leader on that. In Australia, if we talk about subsidising EVs and renewables, I've been involved actually in discussions on social media. People will, the line that you'll most often see is, nope, it shouldn't be subsidised. If it can't stand on its own 2 feet, if the economics don't stack up, then don't do it. It's not worth doing. Again, that got me thinking about subsidies in Australia, and our manufacturing industry for vehicles finished up a couple of years ago now. But in about the last 15 years of that, of manufacturing in Australia, I think the government paid subsidies, and again, I haven't been able to fully fact check all these, so there's a bit of a caveat around them. But certainly over $5 billion in subsidies to that industry. And I think near the end, it was averaging about $415 million a year. So that's a pretty generous subsidy when you think about it like that. And I know that there was a whole range, I'm not going to get into whether that was right or wrong. There's a whole range of reasons for doing that and supporting industry. But that was an industry that was very heavily subsidised. Actually, in Australia, those sorts of numbers, that's an absolute pittance compared to the subsidies in Europe that European and the US governments offer to their manufacturing industries. So, I'm stuttering a lot. You can tell it's early. So subsidies in that sector are not at all uncommon. The other one in Australia that made me think about subsidies is in the fossil fuel industry. So, again, without being able to fully fact check this, but from what I've been able to see, there's subsidies in that sector, perhaps around $10 billion a year. And in fact, one of the biggest ones is a thing we have here called the Fuel Tax Credit Scheme. And what that is You don't have to pay fuel excise, I think particularly on diesel, if you're using your vehicle on non-public roads. So it might be on private property, doing works or transportation or those things, and it's not on a public road. You don't have to pay the fuel excise. It was originally designed actually to benefit farmers, so farmers running diesel equipment on their farms wouldn't have to pay the excise for that activity. But the major beneficiary actually of that scheme every year is the mining industry. So those huge mining trucks that you see driving around transporting stuff in, open pit mines and on mine sites are actually exempt from the fuel tax excise because they're on private property. So that results in billions of dollars of subsidies to the mining industry every year. If we can subsidise probably the most profitable sector in the economy in Australia, why can't we subsidise EVs and why can't we subsidise renewables as a starting point? It just stacks up on so many levels. And again, I think if you look at the example in Norway, there's very solid reasons, including economic reasons, for doing that. In Australia, particularly around infrastructure, we're relying on other groups to do that heavy lifting. So, the Queensland government have done the electric highway. I've spoken before on this channel about the Round Australia Electric Highway that was sort of a bit of a joint venture with the Tesla Owners Club and the Electric Vehicle Association here in Australia. NRMA, motoring group in New South Wales, have spent, I think, the last reports, maybe $10 million putting charging infrastructure into sort of more regional areas of that state. They're doing that for a reason, and again, economically, this is all going to stack up over time, and government really could get on board. A starting point for us, an easy starting point, could be the luxury vehicle tax. So in Australia, there's a tax on luxury vehicles that are imported. It was initially there to protect our manufacturing industry. Here we're going full circle. We don't have that industry anymore. So you could scrap that tax fully off EVs and incentivise it really simply. And now back to fully where I started this video and why I reshot it. Tesla Tom's tweet was about ACVs and them doing some manufacturing in Australia. And it also reminded me of C Electric was another one that I saw at the Electric Vehicle Association's conference last year. Australians have traditionally been innovators and inventors. In fact, if you're streaming this video via Wi-Fi, some Australians are involved in that. If we provide the right incentives and the right environments, again, I think Australia could play a part in this whole transition and be real leaders in the world. I think ACV, C Electric and others, if we can just get that right for them, we can have a different type of manufacturing industry in Australia, which will be an amazing thing. So back to subsidies. In my view, if they're used the right way, they're targeted in the right way, absolutely makes sense for Australia to subsidise the EV industry and renewables at the moment. We already subsidise other sectors, as we pointed out, and this one makes a lot of sense. Look, thanks for watching this video. We're going to have hopefully some big announcements in the next couple of weeks, so stay tuned. If you like this one, give it a thumbs up. If you don't already, subscribe. If you do subscribe, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And until the next video, safe EV travels.